Boktai 2 marks the return to San Miguel for the first time as you seek to uncover its circumstances after Django originally fled the city to deal with Ishtrakhan, the City of Death, in the first game, as there are no longer duties holding him back. The premise is that some immortal snatches the gun del Sol as you're traveling, and you find yourself defenseless against the undead. That features the whole melee weapons aspect to change up the game's formula, and it largely works. Still going on with the Norse mythos, this game presents the 4 stags that eat at the World Tree's branches, Gawain, Duavlin, Dunye, and Dorador, as the main antagonists, known as the Shadow Clan of Immortals. Their roles in Norse mythology is quite unclear, but one of their interpretations is as of the 4 elements, which works wonders here as something similar exists in Boktai. Anyhow, I'll use a more American English pronunciation from this point on when referring to them: Dane, Dvalin, Dunyer, and Durador. So this is the first game to demonstrate more background relating to the Immortals, as they lack consensus even amongst themselves, as their ambitions differed from Hel, who was the queen of the Immortals in Boktai 1. Additionally, and perhaps most importantly, the shift from what was essentially a stealth puzzler game with a bit of action now becomes a full-on action RPG, and such presents its own circumstances. Many of its elements and designs from the first game no longer apply, such as level design and enemy behavior that become the basis for Boktai 3 and Lunar Nights. But before I get into the plot and whatnot, I have to talk about the consistency between titles by using the title system, which was amazing at the time. So when you beat Boktai 1 and 2, depending on various parameters and whatnot, you can obtain titles that determine a ranking, which it prompts an associated code for you to input into the subsequent game for neat bonuses and whatnot. It also served as a way to input onto their website to provide more in-depth statistics, like the older Metal Gear Solid games would. I would have mentioned this for Boktai 3, but the sales figures were not enough for Konami to publish that game in the West. Nonetheless, I freaking love how creative it was to do something like this prior to the modern style of reading save files from hard drives. The only other game that I know that did something like this was the Golden Sun series, if I had a nickel for every time and all that. Right, so Boktai 2 is definitely the most experimental of all the games, as it clearly shows in its ability to potentially softlock yourself, design choices that lead to quick game overs, and puzzles being the forefront comparatively to 3. Not that the puzzling aspect is bad, but Boktai 2 is more akin to 1 in that respect. However, the second game does move the series forward overall in terms of mechanics, but it definitely required some refining which you see in 3. I had some rather lucid flashbacks to back then, as I felt I was truly back into Boktai. The "oh right, this exists" type of epiphany. Let me just say, some of those puzzles were straight up diabolical, and one in particular I remember after all these years. How were kids supposed to figure them out back in the day? Yeah, I do know actually, things like strategy guides that you would actually buy, but the internet had me covered. GameFAQs and GameSpot, what a duel back in the day. Just don't look at the discussion boards. In any case, I genuinely don't understand why it was rated lower than the original, as the ambitions and advancements forward far exceeded the original even if its scope and experimental content was confusing at times. I still think so now, but this game is definitely the awkward in-between middle child title sort. Boktai 2 was the first to feature allocatable stats, of which there are 4 here: Vitality, Energy, Strength, and Agility. Vitality and Strength inherently make sense. More HP and hit harder. The big problem I have is with the last one, as Agility controls attack speed and movement speed, which other than fruits that improve speed or enemy behaviors that slow you down, this was the first and last one in the series I believe. It's pretty darn broken, as the best form of defense is to not get hit at all, and to be able to deliver damage in a time frame while not getting hit. And if you do get hit, you take less damage while also scaling relative to the requirements of armor weight, so it seems too loaded compared to the other 3 stats. The minute differences in playstyle is noticeable from going from 3 to 2, as I'm sure character speed was something they meticulously adjusted from 2 to 3. But the greatest departure is the energy stat compared to Boktai 1, as energy is no longer defined by the battery capacity of the gun del Sol, but a stat in which you can now increase. This radically changes things from Boktai 1, as you can swap batteries there to accommodate a lack of sunlight. By the way, yes, the first game maintained real-time values of all the batteries back then. I don't think they've seen that in the GBA title. Slap that in with the game's exclusive weapon proficiency system like that of the Elder Scrolls series, as damage by weapons and strength is only 2/3 of the equation of your damage, and you got Boktai 2. I kinda wish they kept it in for the 3rd game. Overall, the system was an incredible step up from the original game, as it lent itself to different gameplay styles. Are you unga bunga big HP and strength? Do you have a high energy capacity to keep utilizing elemental magic? Do you like building for defense to move faster with higher tiers of armor? And would you rather keep creating new weapons to gain power over weapon proficiency, as you swing less times with stronger weapons overall? Speaking of which, Boktai 2 features the armor slot, noted by the durability or its defense value, weight, as well as its special effect. It is rather rudimentary here, but you gotta give them credit for the solar smithing system for weapons, which as you'd imagine, requires the solar sensor functionality. It is rather simple as you fuse the current and the next tier of the same weapon to make a new one, and keep that process up for subsequent ones. The thing was, however, they had so many weapons as was one for every 5 levels or so until 57. While you didn't need to make a new one every time you hit a new level cap, it was nice to see all the unique designs. The minigame associated with it is also different from Boktai 3's. Here you select a range and try to hit that center for 30 seconds, while the third game has the minute of maintaining the center and then bashing it loop. Finally, this game was the first in the series to feature character portraits. It's a small addition, but really though, they are quite tiny, but makes a massive difference in storytelling, especially as the roster of characters increases in this game. Right, 4 main immortals to defeat just as before that leads up to the big bad, and they are found at the 4 major locales around San Miguel: the Cathedral, the Dark City, the Aqueduct, and the Spiral Tower. But wait, you see, the game tries to shift your expectations with a detour between the first 2 areas, the Desert and Desert Temple. The creative direction to make something that distinctively shifts your expectations compared to the straightforwardness of the other titles is definitely a standout to me. Also, unlike the third game, this game features 7 or so mini-dungeons or separate optional experiences from the Immortal Dungeon. They are akin to the numerous ones found in Boktai 1, but now they are much larger even if they fulfill a similar role. With that, however, we get the most one-off type of designs that are seen in the game, as while Boktai 3 can be seen as rather safe and predictable by a series maturity, 2 has a lot going on in both its main and optional content. You got things like playing as Sabata, Django's vampire state, manipulating between time states of areas, a repeated catacomb in which you can select the enemy archetype, and far more use of shielding or purposely manipulating whether sunlight is hitting the solar sensor or not as a mechanic. I'd go as far as to say that a lot of the praise for the series should come from this game specifically, as it is the framework for the later games, even Lunar Nights. Anyhow, the game starts out with the Gundel Soul stolen as you make your way to San Miguel to figure out why and how such an individual can use it. I like the cowboy draw style that this immortal uses. As you travel inward, you encounter Zazie, who is actually the Sunflower Girl, a young witch in training whose mentor, alongside others, actually helped Ringo, Django's gunslinging father, defeat the King of Immortals prior to the events of the first game. This impromptu meeting might have been foretold, as she specializes in foretelling the future with star reading, and the prediction of the world is bleak. She provides you with the very punny soul device, as she lends you what is essentially a hunk of junk for an exuberant price, hence Vice, that enables you to utilize elements as you would with the Gundel Soul. After meeting again in the city, she asks you to find Violet's grandfather, who actually built the Gundel Soul. You'd think that you would have info of what's going on here, so off to the Cathedral you go with the fire lens as payment in advance. Also, there's this peculiar cat called Nero who leads you to many of the game's major locales. Very important, of course. I actually have way less to say about the areas themselves in this game, as one of the major things are the puzzles. The overall feeling I get from it is that this game is rather homogeneous in its makeup with how puzzle presentation, variety, and frequency are involved. They're not the same, but the way that they are utilized are to the same effect or intentionality in my opinion. You see, puzzles are the main way that the game actually does its content, other than battling, and the fire enchantment is obviously provided earlier for that reason. For the Cathedral, I actually found myself lost for a bit, as the layouts definitely felt like the things were separated solely as a way to figure out puzzles, and this dungeon is the only one to go to such lengths to confuse me with its strange layout. I didn't feel lost in the other ones, so this is kinda an exception that loops back to Boktai 1 in its level design. It was great seeing this area again though, and I kinda remember some elements of it, such as the initial garden with that darn dog, and the underground sections. One thing that the Cathedral area does is introduce the player to the rest of the weapon types. So you get the hammer and spear archetypes, and while they have obvious differences in combat, they also serve as puzzling tools, as you can smash crates with the hammer and reach objectives with the spear. Their combat focus is largely overshadowed by the frequency in puzzles here, however. You got Resident Evil-esque puzzles like searching for book titles that start with the letters W, O, R, and D, trying to puzzle together ambiguous hints and whatnot that leads you to plugging in crystal balls to make out a visual onto the cathedral floor. All that unlocks a hidden staircase descending downwards. It's all tutorial stuff to acquaint you with the structure of what comes after. The boss is the White Dunere, a tutorial boss who is freshly awoken from her slumber. I know that it's supposed to be easy, but I feel like the experience could have done more. Just hit the candles in the middle with your fire poker to attract them off towards the flame and avoid the little grubs and the occasional AoE attack. At the second half of the fight, the middle is no longer available to hit, so you have to hit the 4 associated levers in each of the corners. That's the whole fight. What is interesting here is that there are solar bamboo shoots in the arena itself. I don't think I've actually seen something like that in a boss arena. So yeah, they wanted to make sure that it starts off as simple and easy as possible as a first introduction to melee combat with bosses. As the request here was initially to come here to save the Solar Smith, and since he isn't located elsewhere here, he's actually in the next room. You notice that the wedge seal is undone here that caused the immortal here to awaken, as your efforts in the first game with stopping the undead was only temporary. For some reason, the undead have arisen once again, now to break these seals that house the mortals. The route back to purify the boss is quick and easy, especially since power nuts are easy to obtain here to expedite the coffin moving process, minus the need to utilize the triple weight slot, which I thought was really neat. So speaking of purification, this game introduces immortals directly attacking the pile drivers themselves. Previously, it was just darkness overpowering light in Boktai 1 with an occasional attack at Django, which wasn't all that engaging. Instead, to do maximum damage, you have to knock back the immortal to the center. This adds a bit more depth as you have to account for the boss's elemental attack, while also now moves around and attacks generators directly, which deactivates them quite quickly. As you finish up purifying the immortal, you meet Lita again, who is from the first game. She provides extremely helpful advice that San Miguel's misfortunes are due to its solar tree's incapacity to absorb solar power. Somewhere in that process, it is thwarted by something else taking it before the tree can do so. This starts the process of introducing various NPCs to you, both in terms of characterization, but also in their respective gameplay functions. Lita acts as a healing item vendor. Violet, who if you did a side quest, provides you now with item storage service that can store consumables, weapons, and armor. The Smith now helps you create weapons. Zazie appears once again to cue you to your next locale, and it is revealed that not only is the soul device a piece of junk, but Violet actually picked up the flame lens while attempting to find her grandfather earlier, which makes Zazie quite the character to give you someone else's efforts as your reward. Onwards then to the desert. If I had to describe the desert component's significance, it would be the early setback trope in which the protagonist stumbles upon at no real fault of one's own doing, which the trouble of the event leads to its own metaphorical rabbit hole. Note that Nero doesn't lead you to this place. Like with the Cathedral, I think that this section represents a shift of expectations from the first game into the second one, and you can clearly see this from the level design itself. What was generally rough and lacking as simple rooms stitched together now has many unique assets and shifts your expectations in many ways. They improved the rough, almost carved out look of the first game within the same framework of limited textures and details. They've also somehow fit in the Cathedral Holy area, a weathered topside, the desert itself, and the second half temple area, which is going places given that usually the idea of an area thematically was just one previously. The Cathedral area has two, the outdoor section and an inside. Also, combined with levels is the idea of how complex areas can be. It's far more ambitious than every other map, with large layers, and with the lowest one leading to its own dungeon within a dungeon which hasn't been done before. Also, Kid, the armor and item shop guy, is introduced here and he provides you the ice lens for whatever reason. If they didn't outdo themselves now, well, how about that boss fight? So you meet Zabata here as for some reason he decides to show up here and tells you that you're a dunce for having the Gun del Sol stolen from you, provides you with the cloud lens, and tells you to get out of his face. It's neat that they differentiated his character model from yours starting from this game. And after various new puzzle designs in the second half of the area, you meet the immortal of the area, Red Ringo turned vampire with some mysterious fellow incapacitating Otenko. You'd be surprised how often this occurs. Ringo's moveset is similar to the counts as you saw in Boktai 3 and originally in 1, but introduces Sabata as a new element to the fight. Having a third participating actor in a battle is extraordinarily rare and occurs just once in Boktai 1, so yeah, avoid having damage directed at him as he charges up dark energy to confine Ringo to deal some serious damage. You beat him, and it's revealed that it's your father, which, if you couldn't tell, is being controlled. He bites you, and now you have turned into a vampire. You know that Scarf is supposed to protect Django from immortals getting close enough to hurt him by such means, but whatever. This starts another gimmick of putting a spin on the idea of purification, as now you will have to play as Sabata as you try to help purify Django instead. Sabata, however, takes damage from light as another gimmick as he's loaded with dark matter fused into his cellular makeup. I didn't speak of this before, but this time it has Django's HP bar slowly diminish over time as he tries to fight off the influence of dark, which is probably the prototype they've used as a timer for coffin runbacks in Boktai 3, which back then I disliked, but don't really mind now. The devs cheekily placed boxes in the way to make the trip longer, which unlike the other games, features only one pile driver locale. Anyhow, Django doesn't ever attack you, which is a nice little detail as he would never hurt his brother. He only goes for the pile driver itself. Now he knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of solar cancer. Sabata is incapacitated by using the power of the sun, as he shares similar characteristics as you in being able to use the pile drivers, and it kinda works at least as you gain back your sanity. Things like sunlight, but also rain will hurt you too. After speaking to everyone for some unique dialogue, you're directed to the northeast as your newfound dark capabilities can remove whatever is causing the solar tree's delay. Nero is quite conveniently here as well. Enter the Dark City, which I would consider to be the final best highlight of Boktai 2, which kinda tempers its own expectations thereafter. The area itself partially acts as a tutorial for using what is coined as Black Django or Vampire mode. The mode has various unique properties as melee is faster, you hit harder, and you act more impulsively as losing health causes you to drop half your HP to do a widescreen AoE attack. You now have access to the Dark Element, transformations into a rat and bat, and the back attack Wolf Pounce that allows you to restore HP while inflicting good damage. What is cool about the rat and bat is their properties. The bat can reveal hidden chests, which usually requires a sea nut or a blueberry item. It doesn't produce footsteps and obviously floats. The rat is light enough not to trigger weight switches and can move through small openings. Now, this place actually reminds me the most of level design from Boktai 1, as it has many rooms that are primarily utilized for a puzzling aspect. While going through it, I couldn't shake the feeling that although the gimmicks were quite nice, it somehow wasn't as interesting as the previous sections of the game. This also has to do with the limitations with how they designed the quick select system, as you only have 4 slots for magic. Although that works well enough for this section that only requires the 4 vampire abilities, later on, the frequent need to dive into the menu itself to select between magics becomes apparent. I remember getting lost back when I was playing this originally, which wasn't the case now. Anyhow, after trying to reach north enough by pushing down multiple convenient boxes from heights that land into holes, which, by the way, appears to be the central roadblocks in 2, you go up, down, and all around to do things to open up a straightforward path so you can reach the center. This game is also the first and only one to feature a boss fight against another human being who isn't Sabata, and that is Cheyenne. He is actually briefly mentioned by the Smith as one of the last warriors who defended San Miguel. He is here to try to restore the city prior to your coming, and upon seeing you, a seemingly immortal, is bloodthirsty for vengeance as it was revealed that he lost 3 of his brothers to the incident that originally ousted you from the city. The fight is cool as he fights like a human being, kinda, as he can block and has a more advanced moveset compared to the rest of the enemies you fight in the game. I like how the music sounds like something out of the N64 as well. I was having a lot of trouble fighting him until I realized you can kinda cheese him with a spear. Anyhow, he recognizes that it's you and notes that he and Ringo were instrumental in your escape from San Miguel. Although he lore dumps on you, I like the idea that he sees that you aren't deterred in the slightest and provides you with the key to stop the Root of Darkness, or the thing that's hampering the city. He then becomes the weapons vendor and provides you with an incredible magical ability afterwards, the dash. How fast and far I believe you move is based on your solar gauge level, much like the other magical abilities that you obtain. Note how it appears that the framing of some NPCs signifies a halfway point, as the key opens up a point next to the warp. Anyhow, this section is more or less using the rat and bat forms in different ways, as it's much shorter than the first half of the Dark City. As you step down an elevator, you are met by a mysterious boy who captured Otenko, who introduces himself as Black Dane, the true Dark Child. He's actually the one who is mind controlling Ringo, and he appears, lucid and in the nick of time to stop Dane so you can stop the Root of Darkness. I like how the room plays that specific tune that tells you that something is wrong, so yeah, if you didn't save prior to the bottom of the steps, well, that's on you. The immortal in the next room is Retrospective, who is an unwilling villain as she is someone who just wants purpose in life, and is convinced by Dane's honeyed words to work under him. Note previously, these siblings aren't blood related, as their kinship is one of tight-knit bonds, and you can easily think of it as him exploiting his siblings for his grand scheme. This is the smallest arena I've seen in a Boktai game, by the way, and now that I think about it, it's actually implicative of the rather uneven later half of the game. It is ironic as she notes that he fooled around long enough, as her fight is exactly that. In any case, she is a boss with 3 unique phases noted by the plant bulb in phase 1, expanding bulbs in phase 2, and a switch up between only 2 attacks in phase 3. If you weren't stubborn like me, or paid attention to the idea that you came across a hard wall with her fight, well, you're supposed to use your vampire abilities that are the focal point of this area in this battle. In the second phase, you can use the bat ability to locate which plant bulb she is within. While in the third phase, you're supposed to use the wolf ability to make quick work of her. I totally didn't win and have 0 items left for the run back. Nope, not me, and had to refight her. Yeah, that was actually me. But additionally, it is rather late, but the third immortal finally introduces the solar barrier in this game that doesn't allow the immortal to move, as you can safely walk elsewhere if need be. This is also the first time that the game introduces an alternate route specifically designed as a shortcut or an obvious specific path to take as the run back, which doesn't exist for the previous scenarios. The metal grates from the first game are now an active detriment, with you now slinging a coffin on your back, but yeah, as for the purification itself, that implies difficulties given Django's current weakness to sunlight. I tried using sunscreen just like with Sabata earlier, but that didn't help. As the fight begins, you immediately flop over as the sun is too much. It's a small detail, but they use the mechanic of drawing the sun sparingly as a dramatic effect, as everyone's motivation provides Django with the resolve to overcome the vampire effects. It's very much power friendship stuff.
Our sun!
Congrats, the power of the sun is back in your hands and provides you the option to swap between red and black versions. Oh, and the ability to use Rising Sun magic, which provides +4 solar gauge for a short duration given that you have the energy to do so. Her HP bar goes down extremely fast at 9 bars. Alright, speaking of which, this is the first game to introduce 2 extra bars of sensitivity to the solar panel to distinguish the levels more. Unlike Boktai 1, even 4 of its 8 total was really strong in terms of energy gain. 2 and 3 made it so you needed more to charge your energy at a similar rate. It's like 6 or 7 was the old 4. In any case, this fight was rather easy even if purifications are pretty easy overall. Dirador notes sadly that of her circumstances and actually likes the sun. It implies that Dane's solution to this was the best possible option as she never had the opportunity to see otherwise. It is implied that she provides you with healing magic that can revitalize plants, and now without her meddling, the solar tree can be finally reinstated. Man, the solar tree growing mechanic. It returns from the first game and is absent in the third. So as you have sunlight hit the solar sensor, the game records this build-up in real time that determines the stage at which the tree is at. This is visually represented and provides you with rewards per stage. It's one of those endgame objective things that you can do if you wish, but it's a great example of steady progress that keeps you playing the game. It's not as great as it was in the original, both in terms of visual presentation and rewards, but I think it serves its purpose well here. Nero, who is somehow injured, then directs you to the left, which is the start of the Aqueducts. You meet your father here somehow, and if his strange speaking style doesn't make you immediately question him, well, he tells you that he wants you to find the tarot cards associated with removing the seal Blue Dvalin, as Dane is supposedly inside. Surely this makes so much sense given that he can get through what is an airtight seal because he has the ability to slip through the tiniest of cracks. Sure, buddy. He gives you the Earth Lens to help you in your quest, and interestingly, it is the only time in which the Earth Lens is the last one to obtain. Anyhow, go back to the previous Immortal areas to find specific areas that you couldn't otherwise get into without your new capabilities. While the Dynamite Wall is reachable previously, you need a new Dark Element to cut the live Vine Tendril, and such applies to moving across the overworld. I gotta say, these feel placed like this as they seem to be struggling due to memory limitations, as its implementation doesn't really match the rest of the game. Upon returning back, Ringo congratulates you and tells you to open the door. The jig is up and Ringo is actually Black Dane in disguise and knocks you out to quickly open it himself. Sabata chases after him, and so do you after you recover. Otanka would be screaming about now if he were here, which makes sense why Dane removes him from the equation to make sure you're at your own discretion. Now, Dvalin's level as well. Easily arguable as the worst in the entire game. The only unique gimmick is that the boss is front-loaded early on into the experience, but the level design, or lack thereof, probably relates to ambitions they couldn't maintain over the course of the game. You got 3 copy-paste rooms and 3 staircases before the boss, all of which do not have any puzzles or elements to stop you really. The waterfall effect is actually really impressive for the GBA, so much so that it causes a crazy slowdown. I suppose it kinda makes sense that you are rushing to stop Dane, but that doesn't improve for the later half journey backwards to purify Dvalin. You catch up to the two of them and it's revealed that Black Dane is controlling Ringo after the encounter in the Dark City. More mortals and more Will of the Galaxy of course, and after some lengthy dialogue, for this game standards, he throws Nero at you. He states he no longer needs him. It is implied therefore that Nero is actually his previous form and that he has been stringing you along this whole time to get you to do his bidding for him. Dvalin is a giant squid or something and grabs you to initiate a fight while Dane runs away with Sabata likely at his heels. Wow, this fight is half-baked. The whole process took roughly about 10 minutes from the boss fight to purification, as the experience itself is incredibly short and obviously nothing like the other Immortal zones. The first part of the fight itself only took about 2 minutes and is basically her waggling her arms at you, which after the slam, you can hit them both together for extra damage. Her other attacks include an ink spit that limits your already small amount of space, and hurling rock bits like normal tentacles do in the series. She will come closer to try to ram your 3x3 tile that you're standing on, but you can just hit Dvalin to tell her no. After the fight, travel across the same amount of stages in the second half of the map and come back the same way that you entered. I will say that the only positive thing that this area does is that it introduces some new enemies in the game, specifically the skeleton fencer and the bow one, which these guys hit really hard. There's also the giant centipede, but The whole thing is just rather fast and easy, and I actually forgot how rushed this whole sequence was when I originally played it. The purification is nothing special as it shares a bubble attack that you will see actually recycled from another boss later. Interestingly, White Dunair and Blue Dvalin both have animal-based portraits for their sections even though they have humanoid forms, which I think actually alludes back to Boktai 1 in which you see 2 humanoid immortals and 2 non-human ones. Afterwards, Zazie comes over to inform you that the giant seal on the north of the map is uncovered, so head on over. So this is actually the end before the end, so before that, let me tell you about the optional content in the game. The optional dungeons are the ruins at the start, then the forest, catacombs, House of Time, Treasury, and Dream Avenue being unlocked throughout the course of the game. And the battle arena is unlocked post-game. The ruins is a short dungeon by the end of which, you obtain a key that opens up the warehouse and introduces the NPC Marcelo. The forest is a map that requires heavy usage of the solar sensor and manipulating it on and off to be able to advance, and you save an old man named Lewis here. The House of Time, as it implies, involves shifting states between the present and the past. It is the first game to feature Solid Snake as a character, yes, him, as he finds himself stuck here and has amnesia. He sells you blind boxes after you save him. The area itself also has a unique gimmick of setting your own passcode to open doors. The treasury is as it implies, but to get the treasure, you must undergo a series of puzzles per each of the 4 rewards. This is also the area where the puzzle that originally gave me conniptions comes from. Although Dream Avenue is unlocked before post-game, it is recommended you do so post-game alongside the battle arena. The Avenue features randomization with 4 stages and is similar to the Azure Sky Tower of the original game. I didn't really much care for it as I had enough experience with the aforementioned tower originally, which will be in the last video about the first Boktai. The Battle Arena is your New Game Plus boss rush that first introduces such to the series, and allows you to fight higher difficulty versions of bosses and whatnot with 4 gauntlets of difficulty: Bronze, Silver, Gold, and Platinum. Onto the Spire Tower then. So, reach the top of the tower to defeat Black Dane, but now it features a dual perspective routing in which you must play as Django and Sabata to climb the tower, as each section has design elements that makes it so you cannot advance one without advancing the other. This is one of my favorite sections of the game, and likely the reason why the Dvalin section is so short, as this gimmick is far longer and more interesting gameplay wise compared to the rest of the game. Lots of puzzle gimmicks here, such as using weight switches to damage mummies, operating switches to route a path using both characters, or a puzzle that requires you to put together 2 hints to move a position of a metal box. It is an endgame dungeon area done right, and besides the finicky switches to hit, which otherwise Django falls into a game over, I liked it a lot. I think that they should have done more with Sabata here, as well as finally an extended section of getting to play as him. He doesn't really do that much, as you expect more tools in his gameplay. Oh well. By the way, whoever put these ghosts that not only drain your energy, but also invert your controls, I deplore you. These ghosts only exist as vicious trolls designed to waste your time and are just as annoying as in Boktai 3. They are hidden until you come close enough if you have the solar gauge on to make things even more annoying. Anyhow, you both reach the top of the tower as both characters are required to activate a bridge to reach the seal, and with it, you catch up to Dane. Informs you the true purpose of the seal, which is actually a giant spear to bind Jormungandr in the sunken Soul City, or a city associated with the Solar Children. You actually visit one of these cities in the first game, but yeah, this one is special. It seals the Doomsday Beast, who represents true immortality, a shockingly fearful notion even for mortals. Dane wants to reject the cycle between life and death as it will only bring chaos, and decides that this act will immediately see darkness as the dominant and only force. But it's not too late yet. Strangely enough, Dane asks you if you wish to join him, and perhaps you selected no, but I don't recall what happens if you actually do join him. Immediate game over? Anyhow, it is a boss of 2 phases, with the first one being the same as Ringo's fight as before, but with additional gimmicks such as these dark balls he spawns in 3s. For the second part, he decides to knock out Sabata to get serious, but he retains his remaining health. Dark projectiles that suspiciously look like colored bubbles, the same 3 balls, but now he can grab you as well, and the same lunge attack. So much for being such a powerful being.
The sun will rise tomorrow.
As the tower is too high up, there is a convenient section to unlock that acts as an elevator to bring you near the bottom. Drop down using a hole to bring both yourself and the coffin to the bottom and purify him. I really like the neat detail of Ringo holding him in an arm lock and the visual that they provide here. Same triple ball attack from earlier for the purification phase. He makes one last plea to you to help him fulfill darkness, but clearly Django doesn't see this as an option. This section doubly serves as a formal farewell to Ringo, as something similar happens with Mani, Django's mother, in the first game. This is where you see the phrase, "The sun will rise tomorrow," so iconic to the series I believe. Ringo wills himself into oblivion with Dane with one last use of solar power, while telling Otenko to look after his sons. So, where is Otenko? Why, his soul is in Nero as Dane seals him to make sure that he couldn't escape. As it was explained in the first game, Otenko doesn't have a physical body as he is a metaphysical being. Anyhow, that's a reference back to Boktai 1 again as Sabata restores Otenko once again. The Gundel soul is usable now if you speak to the smith, but unfortunately, none of its customization is possible and it's terribly inefficient. Probably just the devs' in-universe explanation of hardware limitations of why it couldn't be possible to wield it like you would in the first game, but that's perfectly fine. Right after that, go over all the NPCs again as you hear the ominous foreboding BGM of Doom for some unique dialogue. After some dialogue that implies the importance of Sabata's lunar child capabilities, Django travels downward with 4 floors that each feature one of the 4 elements and have unique bosses to end each. Interestingly, I found these to be rather straightforward, which is odd as you expect more from these areas given its closeness to the finale. You do however see new enemies, such as these elemental dogs that only show up here, that are frequently in Boktai 3 however. As for the bosses, 2 areas feature slightly different skeleton liches, which are the same skeleton model with different abilities. I've always found the snake-like sandworm and sea serpent enemies to be relatively unique compared to every other enemy, as they feature multi-section hitboxes and never show up in the series afterwards, no doubt due to the slowdowns that they cause. And then to the final area where the final boss resides. This miasma red area is kinda half-baked honestly, as it doesn't really serve a purpose but to give a context to the danger that Jormungandr poses. It isn't worthwhile to grind EXP off these guys either, as the catacombs is an easy source of leveling up, which I must note that although enemies are not difficult, they are quite tanky and hit loads of damage to encourage leveling up and seeking out new equipment. Here's my first attempt at fighting the weaponized skeletons in the House of Time to give you an idea. But I gotta say, Jormungandr is probably the least interesting boss in the game regardless if you dedicated time to leveling up or not, and no doubt the easiest final boss in the series overall. The snake is very obvious about when and when you cannot hit it, and it has very easy to dodge attacks for the most part. You just swing at both sides of its head to do damage to close its eyes, which closing both sides allows you to hit the tongue for 2.5 times the damage. And repeat. I was going to show off a neat trick I learned, which is when he does the hammer slam that stuns Django, you can actually preemptively turn into a bat to dodge it, as the tremors apparently don't affect your airborne nature. Oh well. Otherwise, that's basically a free hit from the snake. What also makes this fight so easy is that sunlight is available, which is not the case with Boktai 3's final boss encounter. When it seems like you've won, Jormungandr easily swallows Django whole as he's too exhausted from fighting what is essentially a perpetuously limitless entity. Somehow, the various characters you met along the way can sense the imminent danger you're in, and in the style of power friendship, Zazie and your friends motivate you not to give up. The various characters are at the seal wedges that connect the giant spear that serves as the seal, and Zazie does some magic to attempt to hold back the beast. In that frame, you see a certain somebody. With the beast held in place with the 4 chains, you can very dramatically use the sun. There's a difference in the ending with a single line difference that is dependent on a hidden bond system amongst the NPCs you meet, which changes the who and what they say when they tell you not to give up, but that requires a lot of grinding and fulfilling requests and whatnot.
You ready?
The epilogue ending has Django, who finally speaks more than a sentence, reflect on the fight, who is unsure whether the shadow at the end was his father's or Black Dane's. It's things like this that make it more interesting, because if it was the latter, then it demonstrates that he isn't a sore loser like most of the villains are, as he has a change of heart. If your intentions are so earnest and if you beat me, then I at least do understand the irrevocable error I almost committed. And that's the end of the game. There are so many things I haven't noted, such as the Nero minigame when you beat the final boss on the second time onwards, or speak to him at the warehouse, crimson enemies that drop special weapons, and the multiplayer aspects of Boktai 2, which I cannot cover, and the library. There is Lady, the guild member, who has tasks based on the optional dungeons you can take on. It's probably the precursor to Boktai 3's main optional content, and the library's function is similar in that game too. This is the game I actually have the most complaints about, but I still think it's a really good game, and I'll say its faults don't matter that much overall. The balance between weapons isn't that great, and the cloud and earth elements barely have a purpose in this game. Some enemy stats at late game feel way too inflated to encourage grinding, and that applies for money for buying weapons, for forging, and armor. Yet, I still love it despite all my criticisms, as this isn't a 78 Metacritic score game. What I do want to relate, however, is that I actually got a physical copy of this game rather late. When I was finishing high school, I got this game second hand long after initially playing it via emulator long prior, and largely forgot about the series at this point. Those ending summer days in which I took my sweet and leisurely time to play Boktai 2 were some of my best gaming moments I ever had in my life, as I was fully absorbed into everything the game had provided me. I did almost everything possible and could not ask for a better game at that point in time of my life, even if there are far more modern options available. Now, this would be the end of the video, but there's one more thing, and that's the crossover that is available post-game. This is by far one of the coolest things to exist, as you suddenly get a PET, or a personal terminal that has the functions of a modern cell phone and much more, and houses a NetNavi, or an AI program, that can access the internet and technology as a highly interactable and otherworldly medium. Anyhow, this falls after the events of a side quest in Mega Man Battle Network 4, in which Django finds himself in this internet space and Mega Man helps him defeat Shademan.exe. Now you must do the same instead in your own world, as Mega Man is unfortunately still in the PET and can't really interact with the real world. So he tells you to go to the Spiral Tower. Upon reaching it, it is revealed that Shademan wound up at the Spiral Tower, but for seemingly unknown reasons. He doesn't allow you entry as he's trying to finish up adapting to this world, but being a classical video game villain that he is, provides the two the means to try to challenge him. To reach him, you must first obtain Bat Key data at the 4 ends of San Miguel. That's simply just the 4 immortal areas again, but in specific spots. This time, however, I give this kind of implementation a pass, given this was likely a post-production style inclusion as a one more thing kind, as it's not really well designed in the aspect of finding out where they are or how you get to them. It's the most wonderful way of hyping you up, as you just found out something so unexpected. After finding them all, take the elevator, or not, and go back to where you fought Thane. Now you can fight the last optional immortal of the game. And holy moly, I love the music. It is the best rendition of the Battle Network motif combined with Boktai's sound. It immediately hits me in places I cannot describe, having also played the Battle Network series extensively in my childhood. Mega Man takes a reverse role of being your operator, as he tells you to use darkness to overcome Shademan's shield of the same sort. And this is actually a reference to the Dark Chips and the Dark Mega Man arc that goes on in Battle Network 5. I love how Shademan's attacks in SFX are the same ones found in the series as well. When you remove the shield, he changes color to a more light purple look, which is the same exact one in Battle Network 4 with his strongest Omega variant. Right, I also forgot to mention that this game has different coffins you can buy, and such have different effects. I took one of the endgame ones for this fight, the Iron Maiden, as it increases the pile driver damage. Bring him down the same way as you would with the Black Dane fight. Interestingly, if you talk to Otenko and Sabata, they have specific lines for you about Shademan, which is neat and probably an easily missable detail, as I didn't recall this originally, and Otenko rightfully mentions that something here is afoot. For the purification, he uses a unique variant of that sonar ring that he does. That's a step up here too, given that usually it's a reused attack for the rest of these sequences. When you expect him to be done, he actually isn't. Just as with many anime and manga things, this moment turns into a real power of friendship sword, as you are able to link together with Mega Man to deliver a powerful hit to stun Shademan and then purify him, which sends him back to Mega Man's world. The one and only time you'll see a double portrait in a single frame as well. While it is very anime, this is actually similar to the Hub patch program used both in plot and gameplay purposes in the Mega Man Battle Network series. That allows Lan Hikari, Mega Man's operator, and Mega Man to effectively fuse together in consciousness and spirit for a massive power boost that blurs reality and the digital. Seriously, what a fantastic homage. Mega Man appears briefly as a spectral being and reignites their camaraderie. I love the line that Mega Man uses as a send-off to Django, "See you later, sometime, someplace," and Django responds back with his series' iconic phrase. The reward requires no introduction as it's the signature of Mega Man. The same exact SFX too as with the Battle Network games. After you exit the pile driver area, you get some mysterious text of the perpetrator, who is likely to count a ground-soaking blood and implies his return, which you do indeed see in the dirt game. But that's only half of it. You see, if you put in a specific code in the link option menu, you can play the multiplayer game mode of trying to take down Shademan before someone else does so in their copy of Battle Network 5 with the same method. I cannot tell you how obsessed I was with this game mode when I was a kid learning of this. Seriously, who creates a game mode using both aspects of their unique gameplay to create a multiplayer mode that not only functions well design-wise, but is actually quite deep and interesting? And this is purely fun for fun's sake, as I also never heard of a GBA multiplayer that communicates with a whole different game series using very specific wireless adapters. Both sides use the strengths from their respective game series, Mega Man with Program Advance, Synchro State from attacking bosses in their startup animations and with certain chips, and Boktai with weapon types, back attacks, and enchantments to see who can beat Shademan first. This mode also comes with reward points based on winning or losing that you can exchange for collaboration associated items in both games. You can mess with each other as certain attacks have properties that affects the other player's experience and deny that option by sending a block. So not only is it a fight with messing with each other, but there are mind games and setups as you both understand each other's perspectives. Then, I'd swap over to the Mega Man perspective to give it a go there. If you can, seriously, try it if you have the means. Pure unadulterated fun in its finest form as I'd play this for hours on end. Nothing comes close to capturing that era of early 2000s gaming for me, even if I was late to the party for Boktai 2 and 3. I could say more, but I won't.